everybody, welcome to another episode of Casey Turner Presents Talk to Me. We have another extra special one today. We've got my good buddy reporting from Austin, Texas, the one and only Matt The Electrician. Hey, Matt.
Howdy, how you doing, Casey?
Fantastic. It's good to have you today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you would, please share this. It helps get more people watching, and we want to turn as many people on to Matt the Electrician's music as we can. And if you're a fan of Matt's already, hopefully we can dive into some conversation. You can learn some new things about Matt that you didn't know. Also, start a watch party. I still don't know really what that means, but I know it helps. And also, if you comment below, let us know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see far and wide where people are tuning in from. And also down there, you'll see a link to Matt the Electrician's website where you can buy his merch and all of his albums. And you'll see a couple tip options if you want to throw a couple bucks at the podcast, because right now, between the two of us, we ain't doing those shows and we probably aren't really making no doughs. So this is about what we got going on right now. But we're really happy you all are watching, so thank you so much for tuning in. But welcome, Matt the Electrician. It's good to see you, man. How you guys holding up down there?
We're doing okay, all things considered.
Good. I mean, I know you're in Texas, and and we were kind of talking before we started about just how everything's just getting kind of crazy in the Texas area, and people taking COVID seriously and not. And I've got a ton of musician friends and people I work with down there, and I've been thinking a lot about you guys. But you're smart. You've been staying hunkered in, and I've been seeing you've been doing a lot of live shows too, so that's good.
Yeah, just trying to play online because it's there, and it's available, and people seem to enjoy it, and I enjoy it, and that's kind of how I feel. Is I'll keep doing it until either no one wants to watch it or I don't want to do it.
Were you? Did it take you a second to get into that, or did you go, I gotta start doing this now while it's hot, or what was your mindset when you were? Because everyone's got their own kind of approach to it, especially back in March when we all got into this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of accidental. I don't know that it was super thought out, but I just so happened, I was in the middle of a short regional run up to Dallas, like right when everything kind of hit over here. So I had a show on March 12th, and then I had shows in Dallas and Fort Worth on the 13th and 14th. So I was already up in Dallas on the night of the 12th. And even driving up, like I went to do a private, it was a Kickstarter kind of house concert thing at a company. So it was kind of like an office party. And everybody was already kind of, aware of what was going on. God, it feels like a million years ago now. But,
Holy.
But yeah, so I went to this office party and there wasn't like full-on social distancing and nobody was wearing masks, but there was still kind of like we weren't shaking hands. Like that had already kind of, hit where we were just touching elbows or whatever. And so anyway, I was staying in a hotel the night of the 12th, and I just started thinking about it. I had a show the 13th and the 14th in Dallas and Fort Worth, and I just didn't want to stay. I didn't want to stay. I didn't want to do it. I didn't really know what was going on, and so I called my wife and I said, "Look, I think I'm." And I called both of the venue and the house concert in Fort Worth that I was playing, and just said, "I think I'm not doing it." And I called my wife and told her I was coming home the next morning. And by the next morning, there was a state of emergency in Dallas, and so I drove home, and I got home. I guess it was Friday the 13th, which also felt weird and spooky. And the woman who ran the house concert in Fort Worth that I was supposed to play emailed me, and she said, "Hey, you should do like an online thing, if you don't mind, because we can send all of our people from the house concert, and we just feel bad about you having to give up the gig." And I said, "Okay, give me a day." So I got home on Friday. I said, "Give me Saturday to kind of sort it out." And so Sunday, so 2 days after the lockdown, I did a streaming show. And I have to say, it's not, I mean, I'm not saying that I that I invented streaming shows or that I thought of it first or any of that, but on that day there was nobody in my internet bubble. There was nobody streaming. Like, I didn't open up Instagram and you see all the stories and everybody streaming. Like, there was just nothing going on. And as a result, I think, at least partly, like, I got a massive kind of amount of people for me um, came and watched that, and it went very well. And I thought, well, this is great. And I did it right here in my garage, and it just felt like a positive community thing to be doing. So I said, all right, well, it's Sunday. I'll just do it every Sunday. And I knew in my head, I thought this isn't gonna last. It's not gonna do as well the following weeks. And I was right. Like the numbers kind of came down over time, um, but I just stuck with that Sunday thing. And I did see over the next couple of weeks. I know there were a lot of folks that didn't take to it right away. That maybe took like a month off and didn't want to deal. And I think maybe if I hadn't been prompted to do it, I might have sat around and not done anything for 3 weeks or a month. But because I was kind of pushed into it, which I'm glad that happened.
Yeah, and then everyone took your idea and oversaturated the whole internet.
Well, I
Let it be
think
here heard first. Matt the Electrician did it first, y'all.
yeah, I invented the internet, and so I just want to make sure that's on the record.
I think I remembered tuning in to one of your first ones, and I was like, "Damn, dude, there's a lot of people watching." And I noticed that for a couple other friends that were in that first wave, because there was definitely a moment where everyone was online. Like, I remember I sent out a newsletter kind of letting everyone know these shows were canceled and we're hanging in there and whatever. And I think my open rate was like the best it's ever been because everyone was home and just
Right, just sitting at home. Yeah,
yeah.
and I think in those first several weeks, especially, depending on where you were, I suppose, you could also, mine happened to be pretty randomly a Sunday at 5 p.m., which is whether there's work going on or not. It's a great time for that. But in that first month, a lot of people were home, and so you could sign on at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday and get a bunch of people to watch. And actually, there was something. I mean, it was so freaky and weird in those first couple weeks to really know what was going on outside of your door. Um, I felt it like I found it to be very comforting, actually, to open up my phone in the morning and see like, oh look, John Elliott's just streaming right now, like 10 a.m. on a Monday, and oh, Devin Sproul, and you would just see your friends or even people you didn't know that well. Um, that you'd never heard that were, I mean, I think in that first week, like Neil Young was streaming from his living. It was kind of a nice thing to be able to see that everybody was kind of in the same boat. I mean, obviously not in a lot of ways, economic and otherwise, but
Yeah. And I mean, I know for your homestead, we'll talk about this a little later, but there's two entrepreneurs living in the house that have their own businesses, and I'm sure you guys are both affected in your own unique ways by this, by the pandemic. And or I think of friends that have, the husband and wife or whatever are both musicians, both touring musicians, and I feel like every story has a little silver lining where, because I mean, I don't know if you remember, I can't remember being at home this much during the summertime ever. Like,
yeah,
I mean, or just like not having obligations to be somewhere at a certain time to do
yeah,
something, and
oh yeah.
it is interesting. But I want to start kind of with just letting people know kind of from scratch. Like, first of all, your last name is not Electrician. We some people don't know it's Sever. It's Matthew Sever, and you. I want to. Where did you? So can you tell folks like where you grew up and what your kind of childhood was like, and then how that kind of found your way into being a music fan and eventually where you are today. But like, where did music enter your life, and where did you grow up? Was it were your parents a big influence on your listening habits?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mostly grew up in and around Ashland, Oregon, and so my first memories are all in Ashland, and then we lived in Talent, which is just north of Ashland, um, and we were there for the first 8 or 9 years of my life. And my parents were hippies, and so there were a lot of like my dad was in a band, kind of a '60s rock and roll cover band, and there were a lot of kind of barn parties at our friend's house, and just music was kind of constantly playing. We had a turntable, and my brother and I would sift through the records, and I remember a lot of records, a lot of John Denver, a lot of John Stewart, from the Kingston Trio, and but I remember when we found the Sergeant Pepper's record, and like we would just, I feel like there was weeks and weeks, if not months, where we would just spend hours sitting on the floor with the big puffy headphones, and we would take turns. Like I would listen to a song, and then I'd have to hand them to him, and he'd listen to another song, and we just memorized that record, and it was so mind blowing to us. Yeah.
That's awesome. I don't think I knew that your dad was in a 60s cover band. That's got to be so cool having like, I mean, I think about your kids, growing up with a dad that's a musician, but like I didn't realize that your dad was doing that too. Did he play guitar? What was his role in that band?
He was the rhythm electric guitar player, and so he actually played some six string, and then the lead singer of the band had a 12-string Rickenbacker that he would sometimes play too.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, and they weren't like, my dad is and was a carpenter, and so that was his day job, and so the band was absolutely like an after work on the weekends kind of thing, and so I don't know that they played that many gigs really over the years, but he was in it kind of until there. I think the band wanted to get more serious, and they needed people that could kind of play all the time. But I remember as a kid getting to go to at least a couple of gigs at kind of, for lack of a better word, redneck bars in kind of the Rogue River and Grants Pass area in Oregon, which is pretty redneck. It's way less than it used to be, but back then it was I think fairly divided in the 70s. A lot of hippies came up from California in the early 70s to kind of like go back to the land, as it were. And
Well, I don't want to leave out an important fact that you were actually born in San Francisco, California.
yeah,
Um,
Redwood City actually, but yeah, yeah.
oh, you were born. Oh, right, in Redwood City. Now, but you spent most of your first, you said 9 years up in Oregon. Why did you guys move up there? Do you know, or were you just on? Were they on vacation and you just surprised them?
No, I think kind of the same thing. There was a there was an exodus, um, kind of post. I mean, I don't know all of the exact details of the history. I've Even though I've watched all of the 1960s documentaries. If I'm not mistaken, 1967 was the Summer of Love, and by 1968 or 69, you've got Altamont, which was to a lot
That
of
was
people
69. Yeah,
69. So my
December 69. Yeah.
yeah, so my dad, who grew up in San Francisco, he and his brother were supposed to go to Altamont, and I can't remember the whole story, but my dad had to like wait for him. My dad was at San Jose State, I think, at the time, and he had something in their scheduling was amiss, and they didn't make it out there until pretty late. And as they were driving out, police were already turning everybody around because all the bad stuff had already gone down. But I think a lot of historians bookend the Bay Area uh, hippie experience with kind of 67 and 69. And so I think after Altamont, there were a lot of people in the city. There was a big push to go back to the land, right? To go up to Mendocino County, to go to Humboldt County. And for a lot of people, it meant going further north. A lot of people went to Oregon and Washington. And these were states that, Oregon and Washington, that were, I think, a lot more politically conservative back then than we kind of understand them now in the Portlandia age.
Nice, the Portlandia age.
Yeah.
So you and your brother have discovered the Beatles at this point, and you're swapping the headphones back and forth. Which, by the way, I love that the Beatles have has been the consistent kind of like gateway drug, I think, into a lot of people's songwriting, and I feel like that was like everyone's turning point. For some of the folks I've interviewed that are a little bit older, it was seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan that was just
Sure.
like, everyone, it just changed their entire lives. So at this point at 9, I mean, have you found your way to a musical instrument yet, or were you even interested in that? Or were you just more of a fan of music? 'Cause I also know you had other hobbies other than music when you were growing up.
Hmm. Yeah, no, actually, I decided uh, when I want to say I was 4 or 5. I think I was 5. Um, but I got to go see my dad's band play at this bar. In I think the name of the band was Valley Thunder, and because they were based in the Rogue River Valley. Excuse me, and and I forget the name of the bar, but anyway, we got to go. Us kids, my brother and I, and uh, my dad's buddy was the bass player, I think. Um, and his daughter was one of my best friends growing up. And so we went to this bar, and I think the first set we were allowed to be in the bar watching the show, or maybe even just for a couple of songs. And then we were sent back out to the parking lot to a RV. Like somebody in the group had an RV, and the rest of us kids would just go like sit in the RV and play. I'm sure we had books or games, probably board games or something. Um, but anyway, we watched the band play for a little bit, and there was a sax player named Willie, and Willie had a trumpet on stage. And honestly, to this day, I don't really understand my thought process as a kid. But as a kid, I watched this band, and I thought that Willie, the sax player, was like the coolest thing. And I don't think he played the trumpet once while I watched him. But the next day, I told my mom and dad, I want to play the trumpet. And I know it was based on Willie, but I don't think I saw him play it. It was the weirdest thing. But so my parents found that Christmas, my parents found me, or maybe it was my birthday, but they found me a $5 garage sale trumpet. And they got Willie to come over and he gave me a couple lessons when I was like 5 or 6. And I think mostly the trumpet sat for a lot of years. I would play it sometimes. Before I had it, my dad helped me make a French horn out of garden hose and a funnel. And so I was, for whatever reason, I was very into that. And then once I had the opportunity in school, later on, we moved back down to California. I think it was maybe third grade or fourth grade. I started playing kind of officially, and then played all the way through. Like went to college and majored in trumpet.
Wow, I knew you played a lot of horns, a trumpet. I didn't realize you majored in trumpet. Do you still have that $5 trumpet?
No, though it lasted me through my sophomore year of high school, and then it pretty much fell apart. I helped it along its way a little bit, but I finally got a new trumpet junior year of high school, something like that.
Wow. I bet. I mean, 'cause I've seen you bring the trumpet out here and there when you're at the band or on recordings. It shows up, but it's not something you usually tour with. So it is. That's awesome. So, at what point did trumpet playing switch gears to more folk musician? I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah.
When did you find your way to a guitar? I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, my dad always played guitar, and so he always had guitars around the house, and it never really. I don't know why it didn't. I mean, we had so many musical instruments around the house. We had pianos pretty much most of my childhood, and my parents didn't have a lot of money, but they always kind of figured out a way to like get used stuff or garage sale stuff. When I was 6 or 7 years old, my mom bought my dad a drum set um, that was set up and sat and lived in the middle of our living room for like years. So it was just like you'd walk into our house and in the middle of the living room, there wasn't a couch, there was a drum set. And nobody in my family ever played drums professionally, but we all would sit down and play them. Um, and that's just kind of how they were with instruments. There were just instruments anywhere. So you could pick stuff up and play it if you wanted to or not. They never really forced any of us to take lessons. They did force us, like if you decided you wanted to take lessons, that you had to kind of follow through a little bit and do them for a while. So my brother took piano lessons and violin, and then eventually saxophone. And I stuck with the trumpet pretty much only until I was 15 or 16. I think 15, and I saw a guy at my high school sitting on a hillside. He had like long black hair and a denim jacket, and on the back of the jacket it had like a piece of cloth cut out that was safety pinned to the jacket, and it had written on it in like pen was a quote from Watership Down. And he would sit on the hillside with his Ovation, and he would play like Stairway to Heaven and Sounds of Silence, and just surrounded by girls. And I remember walking by where he was one day, and I looked up, and I was carrying my trumpet, and I like looked over and I saw him, and I looked at my trumpet, and I looked at the guitar, and I looked at my trumpet, and I went home. I went home that day and like asked my dad if he would teach me how to play the guitar. I mean, it's the same old story, but
So your first lessons was from your dad.
Yeah, he didn't he didn't he didn't really give me lessons. He allowed me to use his, he had a nylon string and a steel string, and he let me use his nylon string. It was easier to learn on too. Um, and he had a bunch of songbooks. So his thing was he sat down with me like one day and kind of taught me two or three chords. And I don't want to throw him under the bus. Like he may have spent a little more time with me than that later, but I don't think he did. He kind of just taught me a couple chords and then was like, I got these songbooks. Like go learn what you want to learn. And there were a couple things that were kind of funny about that too. Was that I was listening to like some of these singer-songwriter records that he had and listening to people finger pick. So at one point I had said, "Hey Dad, would you teach me how to finger pick? Like, maybe next weekend or something." And he'd go, "Yeah, sure." And so it was this big build up to this day we were going to sit down and finger pick. And so we sat down and we took out our guitars and I said, "Okay, so Dad, how do you finger pick?" And he said, "Okay, this is what you do. You go like this." And then like he put his guitar down and in my memory, he put his guitar down and walked away. And Dad, if you remember it differently, if you're watching this, then I'm sorry. I don't mean to throw you under the bus. No, but he did kind of let me teach myself. Like he gave me some pointers. But one of the downsides to learning from the book, the first book I had was a Paul Simon songbook, and I love Paul Simon. But at the time, I didn't really know much more than Graceland. I knew a little bit of Simon and Garfunkel stuff, but I hadn't dug back. So I just started going through this book, and I don't know if you've ever looked through a Paul Simon songbook, but there's a lot of his songs are in E flat and kind of odd keys, and maybe he's capoing some of that, but also he's a pretty phenomenal guitar player, and I think he may use different voicings and that sort of thing. But as a beginning guitar player, I was just looking for a song that was easy to play. I just wanted something that was like had a G in it. And so one of the first songs I learned out of this songbook was Mother and Child Reunion. I don't know if you know that song. So I learned that song, but I had never heard it. I had never heard the recording. So I remember I was I was at somebody's house after school, and there were all these girls there, and I was trying to I had a guitar, and I was trying to impress them, and this is basically I had learned and the mother and child reunion is only a motion away. I thought it was like this kind of like ballad or dirge, and I had never heard it's like this. I think it's got like a kind of a Caribbean feel, or yeah, it's totally not what I had learned, and everybody thought it was very funny and laughed at me.
Oh. And so it began.
So it began the laughing.
And that was in high school, you said, right? Or were you in high school yet at that point? Yeah. And this was back in California. Cool. Well, I think this is a good point to maybe grab that guitar if you don't mind and give us a song.
Sure.
If you're just tuning in, this is Matt The Electrician. He's at his home in Austin, Texas, and you're watching Casey Turner Presents Talk to Me. Take it away, Matt.
All right. I'm gonna do this this new one that we just released as a single of my new record that's gonna come out someday. That's the official release date is someday. I don't know what you heard, but heard it too. I don't know if a bird, but a bird will do all the flying things built around building wings made out of whatever you are. I don't know if the words are rolling right out the door of my mouth. It's my mouth to bite off the tongue where the words have begun to remain written down in where you are. What a place we have arrived. I couldn't find it again if I tried. The small geography of an anniversary. Time to save all the years all at once. A single day to begin again. Made to be built within words that were made up where we were. I don't know if we made the right mistake, starting over and over. The bumps and breaks in the bones and hearts, saving the broken parts, making up whatever we were. What a place we have arrived. I couldn't find it again if I tried. In a small geography of an anniversary. Oh, I want to be here now.
And here's something you probably haven't heard in a while here. That's called applause. I don't know if you remember what that feels like. It feels good though, right? You're listening to Matt the Electrician, everyone. He's my guest. He's joining us from Austin, Texas. Someone I've been a fan of and got to know for a long time now. And he's probably played my intimate Bay Area stages more than anyone I think I've had in the last 12 or 13 years. And I'm Casey Turner. I'm a concert promoter from San Francisco. Right now, though, I'm actually in Des Moines, Iowa, because I'm driving across country because I've lost my mind and needed to get out of town. And so it's kind of fun. So that's for those that have watched the podcast over or whatever this is, live conversation thing. I'm not in my normal setting. But it's fun. I'm glad you played that song first because it kind of fits along with our timeline. I was going to talk about meeting your wife and what have you. But I also listened to that song on Spotify right before we jumped on. So I'd heard it already, but I wanted to refresh and hear it again because I knew it was your latest thing you've thrown out into the world. And it really is great. And just watching you play it solo, every time I see you live, I always go through these same kind of emotions of like, I feel like I feel like you're underrated in the sense of you're one of the best songwriters I know, and I just love your music and I want everyone to know it. And also I'm reminded like how great of a guitar player you are. I really like your licks. You really have a lot of your songs have all these amazing licks in them that are so catchy and so just clean, and your performance of them are always reflected super well. You're great.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Also, and also like just to keep blowing some smoke up your ass here. Not every artist, that we see live sounds as good on record, and your albums I feel like reflect you come through, you show up on your records and your recordings as much as you do in your live performances. So I feel like if you see a Matt the Electrician show, you buy a Matt the Electrician album, you really are getting this great representation of the songs. And yeah, and but you're even better live. Like, and a lot of people don't always show up live. So anyways, just wanted to.
I try to show up.
You do show up, yeah.
Step one.
Yeah. But yeah, so thank you guys again for joining us. Do share this if you haven't yet, and let us know where you're watching from. And be sure to visit Matt the Electrician's website down in the comments below and pick up his new records. And hopefully that new record, whenever it does get to come out. I know it's a terrible time to try to. But so going back to that timeline, you're in high school, you're writing songs, but you're also you have a little acting career going on within high school. And do you want to share the story of how you met your wife? Because I think that last song is called Anniversary, and I assume it's about your wife. I would love to share that story if you're into that.
Yeah, I did a lot of theater. I did all the theater in high school. I did I think every semester of my high school years I did a play or a musical. And so the last musical of my senior year was Snoopy, and our high school is very small down in the Monterey Peninsula, in a little town called Pacific Grove. And so Snoopy had it's the Peanuts gang, and so it's a small cast, which is what we always had to put on musicals that didn't have like massive casts because we didn't have enough people to do it. Um, but yeah, so I was Charlie Brown, and my wife Kathy was Peppermint Patty, and so we kind of met. I mean, we knew one another before that. A little bit the year before we had been in a musical together, but didn't really hang out much. That was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Um, and but by our senior year, we were in this musical together, and we just started hanging out, spending a lot of time together. And I want to say we were like friends and hung out probably for a good 4 months, 5 months before we really started dating. Maybe 6 months. It was yeah. For high school in but by high school standards it was we had like a long friendship before yeah.
Before you got pinned, right? That's what
Right,
you did back
exactly.
in those days. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
I love that you married your high school sweetie, and because yeah, I mean, like I feel like being together with someone for that long is such a journey, and such a testament to like how great you guys are. But I'm sure that really affects, I mean, your songwriting as well. I mean, a lot of your albums cover. I mean, I feel like your writing is it's very honest. You have a lot of emotion in it, but it's also very true to like the surroundings around you, and you can hear biography kind of. So you can, if you go back to the early records, you can feel like, oh, writing about when we had younger kids and maybe giving up drugs and that roller coaster of a ride to this beautiful like anniversary song that's super mature and like really ties it all together. How would you say like with that is that pretty accurate? Is that your that long term relationship really affect your songwriting and your family affect how you write?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, I mean I've always felt, I don't remember where I heard it first, but the idea of just writing what you know is I think it's good advice, but I also hit at some point in my writing career, just realizing that I don't really have another way to write. I've written some songs that are not autobiographical for sure, but they're always just kind of less interesting to me to write, and I don't think I'm very good at it either. I think there's some writers that I love. Some songwriters that I've always felt have a good handle on writing story songs about other people. And that was not something that ever really spoke to me. And when I tried to do it, I felt like it came out really forced.
Mm-hmm.
So it was much easier to kind of write about what was going on with me. And as a listener, I mean, I can't speak to my own songs and how other people perceive them, but as a listener, I feel like when a writer is really seems very kind of coming from a place of honesty and also a place of um, kind of sharing a lot about themselves, making it personal. Like I sense that as a listener more, and I feel like it makes it more important. I can't find the right words. That's something that happens a lot in old age.
I I totally I get where you're going with that, and I mean, and I'll add to that. Me as a listener to not just you but other songwriters, like when people sing a song that is about them or something that it just that is their words coming from experiences around them. There's that authenticity there that I connect to. As a listener, and it makes me just kind of want more because you're learning more about them in the way they want to share it, but in metaphor as well. So um, sometimes there's more there than maybe what they're saying, and you can tell just by the way they might sing a song, you know.
Right.
So that's cool. So high school, you're dating your wife. At some point, are you still playing music at this point? Are you writing your own songs yet? Are you just playing covers? When did you start writing songs, and when did that translate to I'm gonna go and sing them in front of people and with a microphone?
I mean, I think like a lot of people that do what I do, you know, it, there's a level of kind of confidence, whether it's a good idea or not. You immediately figure you're probably pretty good, and so you just get out there and do it in front of people. Um, and I think, I think like a lot of people that go on to do this as their job, I got lucky that I had people around me that were pretty supportive because I started writing when I was 16 and it was terrible. And I mean, arguably it was terrible all the way through, 25 or 26. But um, but I had a gig pretty much right away at a local coffee shop in Austin, or not in Austin, in Pacific Grove. Um, and it really was just a place that I frequented every day anyway. And they said, look, if you come in here and do a thing on Sundays, because Sundays was really slow for them. So they said, come in Sunday evening. And I think it was smart. It was a smart move on their part because I don't think it was in a little teeny town. They didn't have a lot of people that came in on Sundays, and they saw all of us weirdo high school freaks that were like hanging out after school anyway in their coffee shop and like drinking endless cups of, refillable coffee or whatnot. And I think they thought, cool, well, let's let them all come here and hang out, on Sundays, and we'll make a little bit of money. And so my deal was them. I think I got tips and a sandwich and coffee, and maybe I got paid a little bit too. I may have gotten paid like a percentage of something. I don't remember. Um, but I got the gig, and then I had like three songs I'd written, and I knew a few covers. But I would invite my family would come down. My brother would come and play saxophone with me, and I had three other friends that were writing songs in high school, and so they would all come down and perform songs. And kids I knew that I sang with in the musicals would come down. We had friends from the orchestra because I was in the band. I was in the marching band, and so I had these friends that were like played viola and cello. It was viola and violin and a flautist, and they would come and do like chamber music, and
Sounds like the best coffee shop show I've ever heard of. It's
it was pretty.
amazing.
I mean, it was just kind of luck of the draw that this place existed, and because it wasn't there, you know, it was there for a year or two. It was one of these spots that had always been a couple different. It was cycled through a lot as different things, and so it's called Bittersweet Coffee Shop. And I feel like after I'd been playing there for a couple of years, there were co-owners, and one of the owners disappeared, like left town. And then one day we all showed up for a Sunday, and the doors were padlocked together, and that was it. And that was kind of the end of it. But it was a beautiful thing that existed. It was super hip. Like all people's parents would come down and bring their aunts and uncles and stuff, and it was a happening.
So now that you've got these gigs under your belt and you're feeling, sounds like you're feeling confident and having fun performing. When you finished high school, did you stick around the Bay Area? Or when did you end up in Austin, Texas, or was that much later, a much later decision?
It wasn't much later. It felt much later at the time, but I went to college up at Humboldt State, and so I went up there and I was studying trumpet. Oops, excuse me. Um, and so I was pretty focused on legit music, and jazz stuff and chamber music, um, and orchestra and all that sort of thing. Um, and so I was playing guitar like in my dorm room or at my house, but I didn't. I feel like I didn't write a lot of songs when I was in college. I kind of set that aside for a few years, and then I dropped out. I was in a band. I played trumpet in a bunch of different college bands. Like there were some funk bands and oh gosh, there was a hip hop group, a couple funk bands, um, some ska bands. And then I got asked to join this Zimbabwean influenced world beat band, and they promised all of this like we were going to go to Africa and we were going to tour California with Jackson Brown. I don't. It was a whole bunch of BS, but the guy who was the lead singer was like super charismatic, and so I dropped out of college to like join this band because I was like, well, I'm getting paid to play in a band. Why would I stay in college? That's dumb. Excuse me. Ooh. And so when I dropped out, there was about a year where we toured as a band up and down the West Coast. It kind of quickly became apparent that we weren't going to Africa and we weren't playing with Jackson Brown, and there were, but it was like it was still fun, and I was having a good time. I wasn't making any money really because the band was too big and we didn't get that much. But at the end of the year, the majority of the band decided to move to the Bay Area. And so I left and went to the Bay Area. I went to Sonoma County and ended up living with a bunch of old high school buddies that lived in Cotati. And as soon as I mean, a week after I got there, I think I played one gig with the band, and then I quit the band because it was kind of deteriorating, and the lead singer was kind of a nutcase, and so I bailed on the band and then just got a job there. I did a year in Cotati, and then I went back to Oregon, lived with my folks for a year, and did some construction, and then I moved to Austin in '96.
And then why Austin, Texas? I mean, that's for a West Coaster. That just, I mean, at that time, now people are like, "Oh, Austin's hip, it's awesome." But like in '96, I don't know. It was a different place then. So what drew you to want to go to Austin at that time?
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, I think that there were certainly people that knew about Austin in terms of the music scene, and South by was already a thing, although not as big. Um, but I didn't know any of those. I didn't know about South by Southwest. I didn't know about any of the kind of songwriting tradition in Austin. There was just a band that I was really into in late high school, early college called Poi Dog Pondering, and they were from Austin, or at least they had lived in Austin for a while. And years before, I had found this cassette tape at a used tape store that was like a promotional use only kind of thing about the band, where you'd get like part of a song and then the band would talk or the lead singer would talk for a little bit, and then the other part of the song, and then you flip it over. So each side only had like 8 minutes or something. And and I remember I used to listen to that over and over again because I just thought it was so cool. They would talk about like the inception of the band, and they talked about how cool Austin, Texas was. And I just had it in my head. I was like, well, they're a weird band, and if they're doing good in that town, I should just go to that town. And I think, like when you live on the West Coast, and that's kind of the bulk of your experience, most of my friends that played music kind of in California, they either went to LA or they went up to like, the burgeoning kind of punk scenes up in Seattle and stuff. Um, and people went to San Francisco too. But I had a lot of friends that had gone to those places, and I was feeling, I don't know, I wasn't in the best space in my head and in my life, and Kathy and I had split up for a little bit, and she was off doing other things, and I was in Oregon, and I'd started writing music again, and I was hosting an open mic up in Corvallis, Oregon, living with my folks, and that was fun. But I also realized that I was in this kind of small town, and there just wasn't a ton going on. And so I just thought, I got to go to a bigger place. And in my head at the time, the idea of going to LA or Portland or San Francisco or Seattle seemed, it seemed like, oh, that's been done. Like I have all these friends that have gone to those places.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to go somewhere that I don't know anything about, and none of my friends are there. And it wasn't because I hated my friends or I can't really explain the feeling. I think it's so hard to reconnect with like what was going through your head when you're 23 years old or whatever. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to go somewhere new, somewhere different. And I had almost no knowledge of Austin whatsoever. And I threw everything in my car and just drove down there.
I love this story because I can 100% relate to it. For me in San Francisco, I had never been to California, and I was like, I had this chance to go to San Francisco, and it was just like, it's not that I hated my friends or whatever. I was in a small town, and I felt like if I stay here, I'm gonna have 3 kids in a house here and never leave and take that chance or whatever you want to call it. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I literally threw everything in my fucking car and drove to California. That's really cool. I knew that your move was heavy, but I didn't realize it was so like I'm just gonna go try this out. That's really really cool. Um, so at this point though, you had not released or put a record out yet, but I assume you've got a collection of songs now that you've come acquainted with that you like, um, and according to my timeline, unless there's something that was put out prior, in '98 you released "Baseball Song"
Mm-hmm.
as your first record, and um, I'd love to know how this happened because you got some song placement like with your first record with I Remember. Hey,
Well, you. I mean, you know the music biz, Casey. It's always who you know.
well, who? I mean, but I mean, you. So you moved to Austin in '96,
Yeah.
and then 2 years later, you put out a record, and you have people that you know that you can make stuff happen. I mean, that's pretty impressive to move to a new town and put out a record and have some success with it right away. And again, this is before you were a full time musician as well.
Yeah. No, actually, it was a that record. A friend of a guy that I met here in Austin, Dave Sanger. He's the drummer for Asleep at the Wheel. I met him through Anna Eggy, who was my neighbor, and uh, he agreed to produce Baseball Song, my first record, and he also played drums on it. And we made it all in his garage. It was very, very cheap affair. Um, but I had a friend from high school who had gone to LA to do like the screenwriting thing. And he was one of my best buddies from high school. We had been in all the plays together. And so whenever that was, like 90, right around 98, when that record was coming out, he had called me and said, "Hey, I want to put one of your songs in my in my movie that's coming out." And I was like, "Oh, this is so cool." And I'm trying to remember it now. So the era, if you think about that era, 98, 99, I was an electrician. In fact, at that time I was an apprentice electrician. I was, working on a truck with a journeyman electrician, so my boss, and we were wiring a house out in Johnson City, which is like an hour outside of Austin. Just you're kind of in the sticks, and meanwhile, this guy's like, this licensing thing is happening, and there's no cell phones. I had a pager for work, and so I had given this high school buddy my pager number, and luckily the guy I worked for was a little bit empathetic to my situation. He not entirely, like he knew that I tried to play music at night after I would get back to the shop and stuff, but sometimes I would ask if we could get back to the shop a little early because I had an open mic I wanted to go to or something, at 7:30 p.m. and he would go, "Nope, we're not doing it. We got to work," and so we'd work until 8 p.m. or what have you. But I remember when that was all going down, we were working on this house in Johnson City that was like half a mile down a dirt road, and so I would get these pages and I had to save it up all for my lunch break. And then I would get in the company truck and drive to the gas station. And then I'd have to put quarters in to call him on the payphone and like negotiate the licensing fee for this song in the movie. And the movie had like a few, I think Sandra Bernhardt was in it and Harvey Fierstein. And when it came out, there was a big premiere in San Francisco that we went up. We happened to be in California then. And we drove up with him and some other friends and saw the premiere. And then the movie kind of just went straight to video after that. It's called Playing Mona Lisa. Um, and I think he did a few more projects after that, mostly TV stuff. But it was very cool. It was like I got this thing that like later everybody was trying to get all the licensing, the movie and TV things. And mine was just because a high school buddy gave it to me.
Well, once again, you were the first to have a song in a movie, and
I invented song music supervisor.
and I love that we kind of organically got into that topic because it's inevitable it's going to come up. Given your stage name, your moniker is Matt the Electrician. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he was an electrician in Austin, Texas, and I like you've told me stories before about spending all day in a hot attic wiring a house and then going out to Flipnotics or whatever and playing open mic night all sweaty from the day. And you did that for years. I mean, you put out a few records, I think, in that when you're in that limbo of like day job, still balancing like, can I do music? Did you have this back of the mind goal or dream that, you know what, one of these days I'm going to give up this electrician job and I'm going to do this music thing? Were you trying to or were you think, oh, it'll always be a balance? What was going through your head around those late '90s, like early times of being a musician?
I mean, I think I always thought, I wanted to play music, and I didn't go to Austin to make it. Um, because I didn't really have a concept of that anyway, and I didn't really understand the business side of any of it. Arguably, still don't. Um, but but I went there because I wanted to be around musicians. I wanted to be around people that were better than me at whatever it was I was doing. Which again is something I just kind of, it was a takeaway from music school, of just that idea that you don't really get better unless you're inspired by somebody who kind of kicks your ass. Um, and so that's all I really wanted. And it turns out that Austin was the perfect place for that because there's no business here. I mean, South by Southwest is and was here, but and that is a big industry conference. But it's different. There's no day-to-day music business here. There were no publishing houses. There were really no record labels at the time. I mean, now there's a handful of indie labels and things like that. But and also Austin is a completely different place now than it was then. Um, but but I just wanted to be around a community, and that's what I got here. That's definitely what's here is a pretty phenomenal community of musicians.
And to this day, I mean,
Yeah.
so the following year you put out the record Home, like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just a year later, which is really great. And so I was listening to that today as well, just to kind of refresh. And then I listened to Made for Working, which you put out in 2003, like, 4 years later. And I feel like that's like Made for Working is like that's where the voice I know today, like that Matt the Electrician sound. You still had that like kind of Home still felt like you were there, but you show up like in that kind of more confident way on the Made for Working. And I think Made for Working came out once you had quit your job and you started doing music full time. And I'm wondering if there was like that, like just going from performing way more and really just honing your craft, or like the difference between those two records you put out prior to what year? I mean, you quit your job around 2000, is that right? I got that right,
I
2001.
th- no, I think it was 2001 or even two that I quit.
So
There
when
were
did you,
some.
when did you know you needed, like, when did you know that like moment you're like it's time?
Um, I don't know. I had just been leaning towards it. I had a couple conversations with local, buddies. Darden Smith at one point had told me, uh, he goes, "Man, you gotta if you want to do this, you gotta quit your job. Like you can't have something to fall back on, and or else you won't be serious about it." And I remember I went home and I told my wife that. I said, "This is what Darden told me." I left out the part where Darden said after that he said, I mean, I got divorced. Once I did that, but still, it was. I mean, the advice was correct. I mean, as you know, like when I met you a few years after that, or I don't remember how many years, you kind of asked me the same thing, and I said, "No, man, you just got. This is what I was told: is you just got to kind of quit." And then I feel like it was a couple days later, you called me from San Francisco, and you're like, "Dude, I quit my job," and I was like, "No, Casey." I felt like weirdly responsible. I was like, I don't want you to quit your job. I'm just telling
Oh,
you that's what I did.
100%. Yeah, you are a key player in that decision.
But I think there's some truth to the idea that if you re if you hone your focus on something and you aren't thinking about or worried about something else, whether it's the responsibility parts of it or the financials or you know, and all that's to say that it wasn't always the smartest decision that I've ever made, and there were times that were kind of rough, and we went into some debt, and we're very privileged that we had some family support through times, so there was like some help, but then also we were scrambling a lot of the time. Um, but I think also the the trade that I had learned. I mean, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. Um, Being an electrician, like to this day, I can go do that tomorrow.
That's a great thing to fall back on. I have friends that are bartenders, and they've said that same thing, that play music, and they're like, at any point, I can go anywhere in the world and be a bartender.
Yeah.
So that's nice. Having knowing that safety net is there, it's got to help a little bit. Even though you don't want to go back and rewire a house, but
Yeah.
well, it's not 100% all. I mean, I could fall back. It's good.
I always felt like if I was kind of hodgepodging together enough money that was similar to what I was making as an electrician, then then I could keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and somebody was asking about uh, a few weeks ago, just kind of talking about what's going on now, and with people being out of work, and musicians and talent buyers and bookers and managers and just everybody in the business. Um, it's certainly it's scary. Like and it's confusing, and day to day things are changing, and in our part of the industry, we don't know when stuff's coming back really. Like, even if things come back, we don't know when the audience is coming back, or depending on where you are. So, but early on, somebody was talking to me about that and said, "Man, isn't this kind of freaky?" And I said, and those first couple weeks, I wasn't feeling that freaked out. I mean, arguably, I'm still not, but part of that is again kind of the privilege of 20 plus years of doing this and kind of building up some savings and equity in a house and that sort of thing. But above and beyond that, psychologically, for the last 20 years, I get up every day and have some coffee, and basically some version of, I say out loud to myself, like, how am I going to make $100 or $200 today? And I've been doing that for a couple decades.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't, like, it's not that this isn't different, but there's a part of my brain that isn't treating it any different. Like, I get up in the morning and it's like, so how am I going to do this? Do I play an online show? Do I, sell birthday greetings? Do I sell a guitar? Like, whatever the thing is, scrambling to make money is a totally, it's a comfort place for me. It's something I'm totally used to already. And so it's not that this isn't more serious. It's not that we don't know what's going to happen next week, let alone next month. But I feel like I'm used to the general feeling of having to kind of scramble to find work anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well put, man. If you are just tuning in, this is Matt the Electrician, and he's in Austin, Texas, and he's my guest today on Casey Turner Presents Talk to Me. I think this might be a good point to play another song for us if you
Sure.
got one queued up. I'll pay you $100 to do it. See? Covered.
It's all working out.
Actually, if everyone here watching goes to MattTheElectrician.com and buys all your records, we might get a couple days knocked out. So
That's true. That's absolutely true. And I will say that I have a lot of records.
oh, they're ready to ship, ladies and gentlemen.
They're just, right over there, you can't see it, but there's just like shelves and shelves of records.
Is your the new hat that you have, is it available on your website?
No, it's sold
Bummer.
out. It's sold out, but we are. I'm. Things are moving a little slower right now, but I'm trying to get some new kind of T-shirts and hats made because I ran out of those early on in the pandemic era. So.
All right, Matt the Electrician.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I just realized I was going to capo it. So there we go. Woo. It's a little step in the right direction. Couldn't see it from space. I'm right next to you. Whatever you decide to do, I've got your back, we're on the same track. In the universe, you're a molecule. In my eyes, you're a great big deal. Bigger than the moon. You're the only tune I hear. I've got your back, we're on the same track. And if we're moving, then we're moving together. And if we're standing still, then it's still forever. What? I'm not a psychic, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know when our ship's gonna be here. Oh, if it never comes in, I would do it all again. I've got your back, we're on the same track. And if a big wave washed it all away, the apocalypse and the judgment day, well, I would testify, looking God in the eye, saying I got her back, we're on the same track. And if we're moving, then we're moving together, and if we're standing still, then it's still forever. It's a little step in the right direction. Couldn't see it from space. I'm right next to you. Whatever you decide to do, I've got your back. We're on the same track. And if we're moving, then we're moving together. And if we're standing still, then it's still forever.
I love it. Um, Actually, that brings a good question up. So, Animal Boy, which that song is on that record. It's called "Got Your Back." Came out in '09, and I feel like that was that when that record came out, that was just like I don't know. That record's so good. It's arguably when I go to a desert island someday, I'm taking that record with me. It's so good. Why is it not on Spotify?
um, it's a long story involving, that record opens with a cover song, which is "Faithfully" by Journey, and that song "Faithfully" was not written by Steve Perry. It was written by Jonathan Cain, who is the keyboard player of Journey. And when I covered that song, I tried to get a mechanical license to cover that song, and I was denied the mechanical license, which entails that if you want to cover it, you're allowed to do it. They can't stop you from doing it, but you still have to license it. So you do what's called a compulsory license, and there's a whole lot of rules that go with getting a compulsory license, and going through the whole process of following the rules. I'm a rule follower, and also I wanted to be able to record the song and put it out. And so I went through this whole process, and it was very arduous, but it also taught me a lot about the business side of things in music, and it taught me a lot about licensing and copyright law. So to compulsory license this thing, I have to do accounting once a month for it, for as long as it exists out in the world. And it's possible that there's some minutia about it that has changed over the years, but by and large, what that entails is that I have to every month figure out how many downloads I have sold. And if I had allowed streaming on top of that, the paperwork and bookkeeping just becomes much more, like 100 times more complicated. And I really just didn't want to deal with it. And so at the time, when I went through my distributor, I just said, don't put it on any streaming platforms. And so, yeah, so it's weird because it's my most successful record. And it feels weird that it's not on Spotify.
You can't just do like a volume, like a new release without that song on it.
Oh, I mean, there's all sorts of things I could do, but it all costs money. And to be fair, then we enter the whole world of, of Spotify and streaming, which is, companies basically stealing from artists.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't expect you to go on Spotify and it would put the next roof on your house. But it is funny. Like I have these conversations about Spotify. I mean, it's like the one good thing I guess about it, if you want to break it out. It's like a lot of people have come to shows, and I'll ask them, how did you find out about David Ramirez or whoever? And they're like, dude, I found him on Spotify, and he's in my playlist, or I saw him, whatever. And so, I mean, in some ways, in the long run, you might build fans out of it, but
Sure.
in the grand scheme of making any money on your recordings, you're getting totally screwed over.
Yeah, at this point, spending the money to, I get decent kind of Spotify traction with the newer stuff, and so I'd just as soon stick to that.
Right.
In terms of like any kind of re-spending money on older records to get them back into the world, as an artist, it's like you're never that tied to your older stuff anyway. It's always kind of the newer. Like I love that record. I think it's a great record. It was a super fun record to make. And the people that have it, and you can still, and the thing is you can still download it. Like if you want, like if people want it, I know they're not going to find it that way, but like when people hear songs from it, I say, well, you can go to Apple Music or iTunes or whatever, or Amazon or what, the 10 million other places you can get it. You just can't get it at that one place.
I'd like to put in a little feedback from a fan here. If you ever did a Kickstarter to pre-order like vinyl releases of any of your past albums, including that one, I'll be the first to sign up 100%. That'd be so cool. Because when you put out a few years ago, you put out a 45s project. I can't remember how many were in the box. Was it six? And you did all these 7-inch records. It was the coolest thing. And you he went into the studio and he got other bands to play back up on it. And it's so cool having like one of your favorite artists like on vinyl. So
Yeah, that was fun. That was a fun project.
now, not and one last little thing about the whole licensing thing. We'll leave that boring talk off the table. But your most spun play on Spotify is a Rick Springfield song.
Tell Rick.
Oh, okay. So that just slipped through the cracks. Okay.
No, I paid him at some point. I don't remember.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, no, it does. It has. I think it's 2 million some odd plays. And when you do a cover on Spotify, I mean, you get people that will search for that song, and so it's not that they intend to listen to you necessarily. I think half the time it's a mistake. It's they search Rick Springfield's Jesse's Girl, and it just happens to be a version of Jesse's Girl that I did.
Well, I think I've told you this a couple times, but I have faithfully on one of my. So every show I do, I've got this playlist. After every show, the Cheers theme song plays. It's my thing because someone told me once the walkout music is the most important part when people leave the night. And so Cheers theme song is the first thing that plays, and the second song that always plays is your version of Faithfully. And I can't tell you over the last 10 years how many people, whether it be at a bar or Great American Music Hall, a staff member, a fan, the sound engineer that night, they'll come up to me and go, who is this? Or another band member will be wrapping cables like, dude, we should cover this song. This is great. And everyone will ask, who is it? And so, and I always say it's Matt The Electrician. And so, like, I can't imagine like how many people have like gotten. Hopefully, that just gets them into your catalog because it's a good way to go fishing.
You're my Spotify, so
yeah. You made just as much money as me playing it at that bar.
Probably.
As you did on Spotify.
Quite likely.
Well, if you are just joining us, this is Matt the Electrician, and you're watching Casey Turner Presents Talk to Me. Do let us know below where you're watching from, and if you haven't yet, please do share this. We've got a couple more things we're going to talk about. We've got some fan questions coming up, and he's going to play one more song for us. So, share this, and also be sure to go to his website below and buy all of his records, and let's just see if we can sell out that warehouse of inventory during this podcast. That'd be so cool. Let's see here. Oh, so one thing that's interesting about your lifestyle and your family is that you both are entrepreneurs. You're Matt the Electrician. You've got a band that you sometimes tour with, but play locally. You tour all over the world. And then your wife, Kathy, started an amazing cross-stitching design company. I'm even rocking some of her work called Fort Lonesome. At what point? So I know that Fort Lonesome is relatively new. Over the years as far as it being a branded company, and you've been doing what you do for a long time. What is it like having a house full of two entrepreneurs, and at what point do you tour nonstop and she's home with kids and you're doing this, and then she's gone, you're home with kids, and at what point do you play tambourine, and at what point do you know when to go to lead singer? How do you balance that world?
I think for us, even before Fort Lonesome with her older company, Remonster, where as when our daughter was born 20 years ago this year. She We both had kind of for different reasons had left our regular day jobs right around there, and I think at that time, you know, it was when the kids are really little. There was they have different needs, and as they get older, they have the needs change, and so it's not always been super smooth, but we always just try to check in, every year, every 6 months, every year, just like is this still working? Is it can I go on this 2 week tour? Sure. Can I go on this 3 week tour? Sure. How about this month tour? No, that's not going to work. Or over time you come up with a set of standards and rules that seem to work, and it doesn't mean they're going to work forever, and you have to check back in and change again. And I think maybe that's just good advice about any relationship is, just remembering that people grow and change. And so you just have to stay in touch.
I think it's your guys' like relationship and how you guys work is really exciting. Every time I've gone to your house, there's art everywhere. It's not like it just feels like vibrant and creative, and you can always feel like energy. And maybe that was what it was like for you growing up, like you were saying, instruments around your house and stuff. But
Yeah.
I feel like I'm walking into an artist's house 100% when I'm at your place. And I mean, it's true because I am. There's two artists that live there, and it's just so cool that also on top of the balance and everything that you both have been very successful at your art. Yeah, just I applaud that. And I think it feels like the support you have for one another has definitely been a big part of both worlds. And
Yeah.
I think that's really, really cool. I don't think that every relationship has that balance, and some people just take off and they forget about the other person's kind of needs and hopes and dreams. And it happens a lot in our industry. And I feel like a lot of relationships don't always make it because of this industry. Because as you know, it's a lot of focus on the craft and what you have to do to promote yourself. And
Yeah. I mean, I think
not to mention drugs and alcohol that enter
sure
people's world is all that.
there's drugs and alcohol. You got to make time for that. It's a balance. um, I think that you make compromises, and we have both made compromises in our businesses, in favor of the family, and sometimes there's been things that where we've done things with our businesses that haven't worked or aligned with our family, and so we've changed those. Or, I mean, you can't do most any kind of life without making some mistakes, and you certainly can't kind of invent your own home run businesses without making some mistakes. So there's been ups and downs with it for sure, but um, I think what we wanted to do was try to make a living doing what we love doing, and by and large that worked out. And we wanted to do that as parents too, as an the idea being that you're an example to your children for what you can do if you want to do it. I would say that it's very complicated, and it's not always the best thing for everybody to tie their living to this thing that they love to do. It doesn't always pan out, and I don't mean that to say that to reference people who don't make it, because there's so many, like, what that means is meaningless, and it's up to you, what that means. So for me, I've made it. Doing what I want to do, I am generally able to pay my bills. And, I think similarly, Kathy built this business that is so cool, and she's had so much great success, but it's also, she's got a lot of employees and a lot of people that she's responsible for their well-being and their happiness and their financial security. And it's heavy. It's not always what, it's funny that the thing that we've heard ourselves. I feel like I know a lot of musicians who talk about this. You go to a potluck or dinner at a friend's house where there's a bunch of people that work whatever job they work, some job that's not musician, right? And you're at somebody else's house and you're sitting around with a bunch of people having drinks, and everyone always wants to know, like, oh my God, what's it like to, you go and you play Bonnaroo, or you go to Japan or whatever, and it sounds so crazy and exotic. And it's not to say that it isn't fun and it isn't cool, but as you well know, like, the touring lifestyle is not often very glamorous, and there's a whole lot of, there's 90 minutes every night maybe that you get to, like, do the thing you love to do, and the rest of the time it can be grueling, it can be boring. There's a lot of that. Meanwhile, I think the flip to that is that I've sat around in rooms with a bunch of musicians where, after you get a decade or two in, you find yourself fantasizing about having a cubicle job, or some version of that, or just working for somebody else, where, like, you just show up, you get told what to do, and you do it. Because it is like, there is a weight to waking up in the morning and thinking, okay, how am I going to make $200 today? It doesn't bother me, but it is a thing that, like anything else, it becomes a grind. And so if that's not what you want to do, if I know people where it's destroyed their love of the thing that they love to do, and that you don't want.
I think one of my favorite things you just said during that was, and which I think it may be the first musician I've ever heard say that. You said, "I've made it," and you're happy with where you are. That is so, like, relaxing to me, like, to hear that, like, because I feel like no matter where most people are in their career, whatever, like you said, success is whatever you call that, whatever you say make it is, or whatever. Not many people say, like, dude, I'm doing it, and I love that, because I wish more people would just realize this is the good moments. This is great. Like, you're paying the bills, like you said. People are listening to your music. I mean, it can only get better from that, or whatever. But that is the goal, and to be at peace with, like, that's awesome,
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it is the goal for me. And it's not what everybody's goal is, and different people need different things. Mm-hmm. And people change, but all I ever wanted to do was write songs and get to play them for people. And, and the thing is, I could do that and did do that while I was also wiring houses, and I could do that again too if that's what it came to. But I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky to get to, over time, to get enough people out in the world that like what I do, that it's sustainable for me at this point. Doesn't mean it always will be.
I will say, yeah, I mean, using the word lucky, I mean, you've worked really, really hard for where you are today. Your records sound good, not because you're just lucky, but you work really hard in your craft. You're one of the hardest working people I know in the business, and you're always trying to get better at songwriting. You're always co-writing, you're meeting other people, and you're a really good listener too. And so I think the luckier you get, the more you put into it, and you are definitely that person that works really hard, and it comes across in all your records and your performances, and it just from what we've learned in this conversation today, I feel so.
Excellent.
Yeah. So just a couple little things here, and then we'll get some fan questions in, and then we'll play a song, call it a day. There's a bunch of things I have written down here. We're not going to get to everything because I had a feeling that I would overdo my notes here as I usually do. But I do want people to know, you mentioned it earlier about going to Japan. You are international. You're the king of Denmark, I heard. And Ketchikan, Alaska, which is not international, but it might as well be.
It may as well be. Ketchikan's pretty international.
But you do hit markets in Japan and Denmark fairly often during non-COVID times, for extended periods too. Can you share with some young songwriters that might be touring their regions or markets what it's like to play in those places, and also why? I mean, Denmark isn't random, but I don't know a lot of people that go to Denmark and call it, like, Steve Poltz has claimed Australia, right? He's got Australia, but you've got Denmark, and I like Denmark. So tell me why that's such a great thing, and what's different about playing in those places compared to the United States.
The Denmark connection was through my work with the House of Songs, Troy Campbell's project here in Austin, and that it's a literal house where uh, we would take in musicians from Denmark would come visit here, stay there, and then co-write with people in Austin for a couple weeks, and then go back home, and then a couple more songwriters would come over. And it was built by Troy and his friend Paul Krebs from Denmark as like an exchange, basically. Um, and and it was only really possible because Denmark, like a lot of the Scandinavian countries and European countries in general, like values the arts, in a from a governmental standpoint, and they give money to the arts, which we don't really have arts funding here in the States. I mean, we do, but not really. Um, and so the house was possible because in places like Denmark, they have performing rights organizations and musicians unions that will basically pay for something like that if they know that then they can send their members off and pay for them to be somewhere for a week or two to be inspired and to write. So Troy had an experience where he went to Denmark and did some of that, and he came home and he thought, God, I wish there was something here where we could do that. So he and his buddy kind of put together this idea, and I helped Troy in the first year that it was open, and wrote with a lot of people. And then after a year's worth of writing, I was invited to go over to Denmark and write over there. But my whole connection there is all from Troy, and so I'm so grateful I got to do that. And so I've made a lot of friends over there, and I got to tour there a bunch, and now I get to go over there fairly regularly, and hopefully I get to go back one of these days. I don't know if I'll ever fly on an airplane again. I mean, I'm sure I will, but you know.
Yeah, I feel your all your talk and stories of Denmark was part of my inspiration this last January. Thank God I got an international trip in before this all went down. I went to Copenhagen for the first time, and
Oh
oh
yeah.
my God, I loved it. It was so much fun. I mean, it was pouring rain and cold, so I was there like the worst time. But I didn't care. It was still really great. We stayed on a tugboat. We were near Christiania, and like it was the coolest. And then we went up and saw Ida and
Yeah.
on a train, and it was
Oh,
so great. So you're definitely kind of at fault for turning me on to
Copenhagen's
Denmark.
one of my favorite cities in the world. It's
I would
just
go back in a heartbeat.
so beautiful there.
Yeah. And then was it the similar kind of connection to Japan, or was Japan a different? Because you've been going to Japan for a long time.
Longer than Denmark. Yeah, I think my first trip there was in 2007, maybe
Oh wow.
2006, 2007, somewhere in there. Um, that was there were two Japanese promoters that used to come to Austin every year for South by Southwest. I mean, I'm sure there was more than that, but there were two that were kind of interested in and focused on kind of Americana songwriters and singer-songwriter roots kind of stuff. And so one of them, Shuichi, brought me over there, I think in 2007, and then Keiji Matsumoto brought me over every time since then. But they're both wonderful guys. I get to see them both a lot in every year that I go over.
That's awesome. Um, so yeah, I have not been to Japan yet, but every time you tell me these Japan stories and how when you go there, the structure of your day with your promoter is like super just on time, and you're always concerned when Tom Freund goes over. Um,
Well, I'm not concerned, but there is concern. There is general concern in the country when Freund goes to Japan. Sorry,
that's
Tom.
awesome. I hope he's watching. Um, so to kind of wrap it up here, I mean, these current times going on, and because you are such a writer with the world kind of around you, do you think our next batch of Matt the Electrician songs are going to be about quarantine and uh, protests and what have you already started putting pen to paper with kind of what's been happening around you, or
Oh
do you
yeah.
even write that way? Is that your vibe?
Do I write? I mean, I
Like meaning like about like
right.
more like outside of your home walls, but like about the like pretty heavy stuff. I mean,
I mean, I don't ever, I almost never sit down and attempt to write anything. I just write because I feel like if I try to if I sit down and go, well, I'm going to write a song about the pandemic, then I'm not going to be able to do that. So I just kind of write, and I write at least a couple times a week. Um,
Do you journal basically? Is that, and then you pull songs out of that, or how do you?
I've tried journaling before. I'm not good at it. I don't like it. It's more just that I mean, as you know, I play games with it. So I'm in Bob's game is one of them, and so
For
that
those guys that don't know, Bob Schneider, mutual friend, has a songwriting game that he sends an email out. If I'm doing this right, you want to quickly tell them what that? I'll let you tell the story better than I.
yeah, he sends. I mean, he's had this game, some version of this game going on for like 30 years, 25 years. But he sends out an email with a title, and then you have a week to write the song and send it in. And I've been in his game and out of his game off and on over the years, but I've been in it all through this especially. And then I have my own game, so I do two games a week. So right now I'm on the hook for writing two songs a week, which is great. So that like so I don't sometimes I'll sit down outside of the game and just feel like I want to write a song, but by and large, I'm mostly just writing for the game.
Cool. That makes sense. So yes, it sounds like we will see some reflection of this world in your next batch of songs. It looks like.
Oh yeah, totally.
Well, before I got some fan questions here, I do want to say, kind of going back to earlier, you are a big part of why I jumped off the plank to do what I do full time today. Back in 2010, I was working in a shoe retailer business and then putting on house concerts for a few years. And Matt played those shows a handful of times, even back to 2007, I believe, when we were in Novato still.
Mm-hmm.
And there was two kind of things that happened that were Matt the Electrician related that made me jump off and do this full time. And one of them was a house concert we did with him, Danny Malone, Scrappy Judd Newcomb, and Tom Freund. It was it was this pinnacle like house show night where everything just felt right. And then that was in 2008. So I still worked my full time job, but then in 2010. You were like, just come to South by, come to South by. You could stay at our house. You got to come check it out. This is when you were like a cheerleader for South by, and you're less of a cheerleader for South by these days, as am I.
I mean,
But
it got big.
it got overwhelming. Yeah, 2010 was a great year to still go, I think. And I went and I met all these folks that now I get to call friends in the songwriter community there. But a lot of those folks, they knew who I was and what I've been doing because, from what you've been doing there. And they're like, oh, you're that San Francisco house show guy. And I was just like, what? Why do you know that? And it just felt like it just felt like the iron was hot and it felt good. And I came home from that, and a week later I quit my job, and I haven't looked back since. And I just passed a decade of doing Casey Turner Presents, which is crazy. That's crazy. So I want to thank you so much for that inspiration. And I mean, there were other folks too that really helped inspire it, but you were the main like. I don't think if I had my relationship with you, I would have done it, honestly. So thank you very much because I'm living my dream and I appreciate it, and you're a big part of that. Yeah. Okay. Want to hear some fan questions? Some of these fan questions are from some people you might know as well.
I think I'll be able to figure that.
Well, so our first one is we'll try to get through these kind of quick. We've got a handful of them. Our buddy Mark Lindsay asks, will you share the backstory of the song College?
The backstory of the song College. Well, that was, speaking of games, one of the various games I've done over the years. I did a version of the title game at a live show that we started with. It was a weekly show I did with Southpaw Jones, and then at the beginning of that show for the first 3 or 4 years we had Bruce Hughes. So it was Bruce Hughes, me, and Southpaw Jones did a weekly song swap. And Bruce was in Bob Schneider's band, and he was in Bob's game. So he knew the game, and we started doing the game where we would let the audience pick the title at the end of a show, and then the next week we would each have a song written. And so I think this was post Bruce's involvement, but a woman came to the show, and she had always brought her son since he was like 10 years old, and now he was off at college, and he had made the Dean's List. And so she raised her hand and she said, I've got the song title, it's Dean's List. And so that was the song for the week, and I didn't really know what that even meant. And so I went home and I thought, well, I'm going to look up Dean's List and figure it out. And then I forgot to, which I think is, maybe that's just even more ironic. But so I wrote the song just about my college career, and I knew that it was a thing, that was a positive, but I was never a good student, so I was not on the dean's list. But dean's list is in that song.
This question is not from Mark Lindsay, but I'm gonna have a follow up to that. Did you ever pay back that $35?
No, I did not. I've had several friends and fans that have stopped by the library at Humboldt State and offered to pay my fine at the library with like cell phone video to prove it. And there's always just like confused librarians because the the librarians there are probably students at whatever time, so it's not like they're hitting the same people up. It's not like the same person is hearing my name over and over again. So it's just like a poor confused college student going, you can't pay fines here, and I don't know what you're talking about.
That's kind of a cool like that's like cult following vibes right there. That's great. That's a good story. All right, Phil Collins, not to be confused with Phil Collins in the Air of the Night or Dr. Phil on TV, but our friend Phil Collins
Yeah.
asks, how often do people ask you to look at their breaker boxes?
Pretty often, more often than I would like. As I have no interest in looking at anyone's breaker boxes. Although I do some property management for my mother-in-law, and so I do look at some break. A couple weeks ago, I was looking at a breaker box, so I still do some completely unlicensed electrician work every once in a while.
You hook up free cable for people, is that a thing?
I would, if I knew how, I would do that too.
Janelle Pearson asks, is this pandemic going to change the way you tour in the future? We really miss you here in Redding, California.
I miss you guys too. I love Reading. Yeah. I don't know. I think like everybody else, I have no idea. I'm really trying to approach all of this day by day, which is hard, as Casey, as you well know, from the talent buyers and bookers perspective. It's very hard to go day by day because you have to book stuff months out. And do. I have so much empathy for the people in the middle in this industry. So management, booking, and talent buyers. There's a lot of management, booking, and talent buyers specifically who I could care less about. But the ones that I like, the ones that are my friends and that I like what they do, I feel really badly for them because you can't turn on your phone and play for some people and make some tips. And so, like, I don't know what the industry is going to look like 6 months from now, because a lot of those people are going to have to maybe stop what they're doing and do something else. And I don't know.
It's a fair reminder. There is a tip link down below in the comments.
There you go.
Our friend Deepak J, who used to own a wonderful place called Whip Inn in Austin, which Matt used to book music at, but I also had the fortunate honor to put on several unofficial South by showcases there, and those samosas were the best, 100%. If you were watching Deepak, those were good. Deepak J asks Matt, who inspires you today and why?
Who inspires me today? Um, Man, it is like every day in this thing feels like a year, as we all know, and so I am just there's so much inspiration right now in a weird ways. I'm listening to lots and lots of records, and every day it's kind of different. So, um, in particular, some stuff that I've heard that I didn't know about before was Thundercat. This guy Thundercat, who's like jazz. He's played with a lot of hip hop artists and like jazz R&B stuff, but and it's real heady kind of out fusion stuff. His own records, but this guy Thundercat has a record called Drunk that's phenomenal, that I've really been loving. Um, God, there's just, I mean, it's like as soon as I try to like think about what it is, I forget all of the things I've been listening to lately. But a lot of my friends inspire me. A lot of my songwriting buddies. Devin Sproul is kind of a constant inspiration. Tim Easton is just like he just never stops working and writing. He's like nonstop. So I love that guy. It's been great to see, guys like Glenn Phillips doing, almost daily live stream things where he gives all of the money to charity, and I don't, Glenn's a friend of mine. I don't know what his financial situation is, but it's like whatever he's doing, he's able to do that. And that's pretty amazing.
That dude has a big heart. I love him so much. I love all those people you named. Um, let's see here. Corey Schroyer asks, "When did you write the song Change the Subject?"
That was that would have been 2004 because it was shortly after I quit drinking. So um, that was a I just quit drinking song, and I had like two or three of those I wrote all in the same couple of weeks, but that was one of them. But that particular one was a Bob Schneider song title.
Hmm.
Change the Subject was the title.
And that song still works your way into your set list pretty often. It's a
Yeah, I still play
I
that song.
love if you go back and you listen to the original version of it. I think it came out in '07 on your record.
I think
Uh,
'06, One Thing
oh,
Right,
six. Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
or
yeah, exactly.
somewhere
Yeah,
around there.
one thing right. Listen to that version of it, and then listen to like his. I think it's on your live at Flipnotics one, right? Yeah, listen to the version he does now.
Got
It's
so much.
fun. You can really break apart the lyrics in the original, and
Yeah, it's very.
I love what you've done to that song. And also, there's a nice interlude in the middle that I won't give away
Oh yeah.
when you go back and you listen to the live version. Diane Selkin, we know her.
Hi,
Diane asks, Matt, what are your top? I like this one because it's a little off subject. What are your top three favorite movies?
Oh, that's easy. Um, yeah,
In order. No, I don't know.
yeah. No, my number one is it's a early '90s indie film called Sleep with Me. That is Eric Stoltz, Craig Sheffer, and Meg Tilly, and Parker Posey and Joey Lauren Adams are in it also, and it's just this weird little movie that I love. It's my number one movie. My number two movie is My Life as a Dog, which was a fairly popular, I think, 1980s Swedish film. And then number three is Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock.
I haven't seen any of those movies. I feel like a
What?
butthole. Sorry.
You got to watch.
Uh,
I mean, watch all of them, but Rear
yeah,
Window is a classic. That's
100%. I will.
oh my god.
Yeah, my no one asked, but my favorite movie is High Fidelity. Gotta
That's a
love
great
John
movie too.
Cusack.
That's a great.
I love the book. I'm a big Nick Hornby fan, and
Oh yeah.
that movie.
That actually made me realize though that tied for number three. My number three or number four, they switch a lot. Is Harold and Maude.
Okay,
That's yeah.
classics, man. Amy Lindsay asks, one of our all-time favorite songs of yours is "I Will Do the Breathing."
Mm.
Based on the recent events, she wants to know if that song is maybe taken on. Or she says it's taken on a new meaning. Let me rephrase this. Based on the recent events, the song has taken on a new meaning for us. What are your thoughts on that song and its implications today?
Mm. Um, I wrote that song for my wife when her father had passed away. And it was a really, really tough time. It was a tough couple of years for her. And without going into all the details, it was a complicated death and it was a complicated life. And so that song was really just written for her to kind of help, you know, to help her. And I don't, I don't ever kind of necessarily assume that my songs are going to be helpful, or do you know what I mean? Like again, I'm writing them for me or for people I know. Um, but that song, I have had so many people kind of reach out and tell me their own stories that like this was really helpful in this time of hardship or suffering or whatever it was. Um, and and so like to me that's again going back to like what success is or making it is like to think about it in those terms. Like I can't think of anything I would rather have done than write something that like is so meaningful to somebody that they played it when somebody close to them was dying or do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's beyond what I can even really kind of comprehend, it's but it's so meaningful to me that people utilize that song in a way that's helpful because whatever else I do in my life or my career, to, to think that somebody used that and it was like a positive every once in a while people use "Got Your Back" as a wedding song, and that's like I can't even comprehend that. Like the really something dumb I wrote on my porch is like what you want to play at your wedding. Like, and I don't mean dumb in a way that is detrimental, but like, but just yeah, it's weird. But it's so it's I don't know. I'm just so grateful that people utilize what I've made for something positive.
And I like the way you do write, like a song like that, for example, "I Will Do the Breathing." Um, I actually did not know it was about your wife's father, and so, but I mean, it's obviously a song of passing and being there for someone, but it can be interpreted in so many different ways for being there for someone. It doesn't necessarily have to be
Yeah.
death, some of your songs, it's like, okay, I know definitely this song's about this. It's very obvious because of certain like furniture in the song, the way you've done some placements, but some of your songs are really open for interpretation, like this one and some other ones. And I love that about your writing. And you don't always go into every song when you play live. This song's about, it's way more interesting because the way you do phrase things and the way you use some metaphors and stuff. It's way more. It's interesting to see how the audience just takes it for their own,
Yeah.
and like I Got Your Back. It's a very personal song for your wife. It's about her, but like you didn't use her name in it. It's like people can take that song and make it theirs for their special person or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's really cool. Our final fan question comes from a guy named Andrew Pressman.
God damn it.
And his question is, Matt, why are you the way that you are?
Well, I mean, the thing is that as you know, I was an electrician, and early on, so my name is Matthew, and shortened that's Matt. But some people, only the people really really closest to me, call me Jim. And so to those people, and this is just a little inside thing, is that because Electric Jim. All right.
There you have it. Matt, it's been fantastic hanging out with you this afternoon. I've had a lot of fun, and you've made my trip to Des Moines 10 times better. And I want to say thank you to everyone out there that's tuned in, that's been here, that's shared this, that's tipped below, that's gone to Matt's website either during this or after this to buy his records. And thank you for all your support of live music. This is actually my last live stream podcast for a while. This was episode 15, and so you can go back and listen to all of them, from Glenn Phillips to Steve Poltz to Bill Kirchen to Megan Slinkard and many more. Sam Chase, Griffin House. We did a bunch. Dan Byrne. They're all up there on Facebook and also on YouTube. And this one will be up on YouTube as well to share afterwards with folks that are not on Facebook. But we're going to wrap up episode 15, season 1. I don't know. With Matt The Electrician playing us a song. Thanks again, Matt, for being here. Go ahead and
Hold on.
good. He's got to go get his trumpet.
Ooh, my trumpet. Okay, wait. Hold on. I'm still here. I'm still
Okay.
here. I'm coming.
And while he's doing that, yeah, do go below and go to his website and buy his records. They're fantastic. And buy everyone's records that you listen to on Spotify, because our points about that stuff is important. So support music if you can, especially during this time. Damn. All right. Ready, Matt? Send it your way.
All right. I think I'll go ahead and do this new song that I don't know if or when it's ever going to be recorded or come out. But this is one of the things I've written during this time, and it was early on. I know that with all of this, with all of everything that's been going on in the world, it can get really heavy and intense and confusing and scary, and so this song was written maybe in the first 2 weeks of kind of lockdown. Yeah. I am scared, of course I am. I read the same Things that you read to me, go softly into bed, to sleep, to dream without conclusions. I can't decide what to wear. What's going on with my hair? You understand me. I beg you to demand of me and stay here forevermore on the sea floor, on the sea floor. I can see the yard at night, and when the moon is broken over the trees, our shadows in real time, I know that I'm a bit more manic than I'd be inclined not to care. What's going on with my hair? You understand me. I beg you to demand of me and stay here forevermore on the sea floor, on the sea floor. What is this floating feeling like? I've never been deep sea diving. I feel so heavy, yet so light. I am scared, of course I am. I've only been around for years and years. All look the same to me. A honeybee, a hummingbird in a frame. I can't complain. What's going on in my brain? You understand me. I beg you to demand of me and stay here forevermore on the sea floor, on the sea floor, on the sea floor.
Oh man, I love it. That's great.
Oh, thank you, me.
I didn't think it was possible to go longer than the Steve Poltz episode, but I think we have accomplished that, which is amazing. I do want to thank my guest and my friend Matt the Electrician for being here on Talk to Me today. Thank you so much, Matt, for taking
Thanks for
time out
having
of your
me.
day. I know it's really busy times right now, and it's just fitting this hour and a half in. But no, thank you, and I really am psyched to hopefully in the near future see you again in California or wherever it may be, and introduce you into a microphone into a room full of people.
Yeah.
I'm excited to return to those days, and thank you to everyone out there for watching, for all your support of this series, and the support for live music wherever you are, whether it be on the computer like currently or in your communities. And please do continue to take care of one another. Treat everyone with love and stay safe and stay healthy. And we will see you all again soon in person when we can, when it's okay to. So thank you guys. Thanks everyone. And thanks again, Matt the Electrician. See you soon, buddy.